MuseScore Café. My name is Marc Sabatella with Mastering MuseScore, and this is the weekly series of chats that I do where I talk about some aspect of making music using MuseScore. And in doing so, I usually pick a topic to talk about and kind of stick as close as I can to that topic, but I'm also always easily diverted, enjoyably so, by questions and banter. So feel free to ask questions about things. I will try to keep the focus on education. That is my topic today, MuseScore in education, and it's actually like kind of an annual thing that I do. Every year, beginning of the school year, I try to do a session where I focus on applications of MuseScore to education. And it's not like it changes necessarily every year, but there's new people every year, and there are new spins on this that, new features that show up and so forth. So that's what I'm going to be doing, is talking about education and use of MuseScore in it. But of course, all the features, it's not like MuseScore has specific features that are only for educators. There might be ones that were, useful to educators, and I want to focus on those. But most of these are going to be useful to anyone. So I hope you enjoy some of the things that I'm going to show you today. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat here, so feel free to be asking questions about things. I'm looking to see if I've missed any particular questions, but no, just some nice chat. So great. So as far as the things that MuseScore can do, so first of all, I know there's going to be some people watching this session who are really actually kind of new to MuseScore. So let me at first take a step backwards and talk about something very general. MuseScore is what you are looking at on the screen. This is what I mean when I talk about MuseScore. It is music notation software. It is the software I used to create that example music that we just heard, right? I put in all those notes. If I take all those notes down an octave, boom, now they're going to be down an octave. Not as interesting. It is music notation software, so you can use it to create your own music. Now, for a lot of people, your first introduction to MuseScore might not be actually creating your own scores. For a lot of people, the first introduction might be MuseScore.com, which is a website in which you can share scores. And there's a ton of stuff, a ton of educational stuff here. So like if you are teaching music and you want music to give to your students, there's a lot of it available here on MuseScore.com. And you don't even have to download the MuseScore software or know how to use it. You can find things and just download as PDF. Like if you decide you want the sheet music for Minuet in G to give to a piano student or whatever, you can click here and see, okay, look, there's a bunch of different ones. Of course, the thing to know is there's a bunch of different minuets in G. And, these are uploaded by individuals. Some of these are going to be better renditions than others. And so it takes a little while to orient yourself and figure out how to find what you want. But here is what looks like a really good version of the Christian Petzold piece that for many years was attributed to Bach until the world did some research. Right, that piece there. So if you want to give that piece to your student, you can just download it here. There's tons of public domain music on MuseScore.com that really anyone can download. You can look at it online. You have to create an account, but you can create a free account. You see up in the upper right-hand corner where my name is. If you don't already have an account, you'll see a login button there. And when you do that, you'll have the ability to create an account, and you can just create a free one. And then you can download the public domain music. Now, there's also a lot of copyrighted music, people's arrangements of pop songs or, Disney movie themes and whatnot. And for that kind of thing, you do have to have a pro account to be able to download. And so you will see there's, if you're not already logged in, you'll see stuff asking you to go pro and, sign up for the subscription service for that. So you can get additional music that you can download if you have a pro account. So in any case, I wanted to show this at the beginning because this is very useful and it's a great source of information. And there's a community here and there's people who upload educational materials for each other. Definitely worth exploring if you're an educator. But mostly I'm going to be focusing on the software itself that was used to create these. So uh, the the things that it can do, it's really quite varied. And so I'm going to start just by showing a couple things in particular based on my experience as an educator. So my experience is primarily teaching private lessons, primarily to adults, and teaching college courses like in music theory, and teaching online, doing this sort of thing, but creating online courses. And so my experience is at that end of the spectrum, kind of the not so much teaching children, but my wife is a school teacher working, in the elementary school. So I want to show some of the things that we've done or that, I've learned from her. So here is a little duet that I put together. And I want to talk about the features that are involved in making this piece here. So let's look at this. All right, so there's a bunch of things that just were going on there, and did I turn up my volume again? I did. It's just this piece is on the quiet side, I guess. So what you see is a number of things going on here. First of all, it's a duet in two parts. There's a multi-measure rest at the beginning because it's intended that there was going to be a piano accompaniment, I think, for this version of this particular piece. And you see that there's multi-measure rest here. You can also see that I have note names in the the note names within the note heads. That's a feature that MuseScore supports directly. And I'm going to show you how to do all these things in a moment, but I want to show you what these things are first. It can also do, as I showed in the newsletter, if you got my newsletter, if you didn't already get my newsletter, go to the pinned message at the top of this, the top of the chat here, and you'll see the link to my website. You can sign up for my newsletter there. But I showed how to do color notes, which is actually a cool thing, and that's how I did this here. I did Control A to select all, and then I went to plugins. I have to actually go to the plugin manager here and enable the color notes plugin. You only have to do that once because it's already pre-installed. But once you do that, you'll see notes in your menu and then color notes. And everything still looks blue because it's selected, but as soon as I unselect, you see everything's colored. And so here's a thing that I didn't know. So I was, when this plugin first showed up in MuseScore, I was like, well, that's cute, but why does anyone want colored notes? I didn't really understand the significance of this. But if you teach elementary music, you're going to recognize pretty instantly that this is hugely significant in that there's a scheme called chroma notes, which is developed by the people who produce boom whackers, which are these big plastic tubes that you whack against each other and other things, and they make pitches, right? And they're color coded, but not just boom whackers. Then there's a whole whole series of instruments. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat today. Whole series of instruments designed for children. Like there's like little mini xylophones or like glockenspiels, I should say, metal barred, diatonic mallet instruments that have the same exact color scheme in which C is red. It's actually, and I didn't know this either. It's the colors of the rainbow. Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, violet, blue. No, wait a minute. What am I saying? Red, orange, yellow, then G, green. Roy, G is green, and then Biv, blue, indigo, violet. There you go. That's the series of colors that makes up the C major scale. And it's used by quite a few instruments, something I really didn't realize until last week. So anyhow, that color notes plugin does that. As far as these note names in the note heads, well, let me just leave it colored. Why not? Um, there's a couple different ways of doing that, and one way is on an individual note basis. I can like select a note and then go over to the inspector here and say under head well, okay, I did it the other way, so I have to show you that first. Let me let me go to a different score here, enter some notes. And if you've never used MuseScore before, I should give a quick demo on entering notes, right? So there's some people here I know who have never used MuseScore, or at least some people who will be watching this. I press N. Oh, and I meant to turn on my little demo mode thing. Give me a moment so that you can see my keystrokes. Demo. There we go. I press N or click the note input button here. First, I select a location. Then I go to note input mode, and you see the cursor shows up. And then I can choose a duration on the toolbar and then just type the note. So quarter note, C, D, and then maybe a half note, E. Now, if I know I'm going to want all the notes on this staff to have the note heads in them, there's a way to do that for all notes at once. But first, I'm going to show you that you can do it individually. I can click a note and then come over to the inspector, and under head group, there's no, not under head group, sorry, under head scheme. There's head scheme, group, and type. Do I ever remember which one is which? No. Trial and error. Under head scheme, you'll see pitch names. And now I see a C there. If instead of pitch names, I choose solfege, fixed do, you see I get do, which is useful for solfege in, as Americans think of solfege, but also it's relevant for people in Spanish-speaking countries or French-speaking countries in which do is just the name for C, right? That's not solfege, that's just another name for that note. You can also use a variety of shape notations for shape music. So there's another one. So let's see. Oh, good. So some music theory fans here. Good. So anyhow, that you can put in shape notation, which is useful in certain types of choral music. I don't know how often the shape music is used in education. I know it's used in certain churches. Maybe someone knows more about that than I do. But the pitch name one is just puts that name in there. But you see, it only did it for that note. If I select multiple notes, I'm going to select this measure. And notice when I selected the measure by just clicking an empty area, suddenly the inspector got boring. There's nothing in it. That's because I don't only have notes selected. I also have stems, which are different than notes. So in order to just select the notes, once you've selected a range, click the Notes button here in the inspector. And I'm not entirely positive if you can see that or if my face is covering it, but trust me, lower left is the notes button. The lower left of the inspector is the notes button. So once you've made a selection, click the notes button, and now you'll see only the notes are selected, not that whole range. Now is when I get these nice options to set the head scheme to pitch names. I have to change it to something else first because it was a mixed selection, right? Some of them were already changed. Some of them were already on pitch names. Some of them weren't. So I change it to normal, now to pitch names. And now they're all pitch names. But that only applies to notes I've already entered. If I enter some new notes, we'll see, by the way, I'm using Control and two-finger scroll, basically the mouse wheel, to zoom here. And then I'm just sort of clicking and dragging the canvas, although I can also use two-finger scroll without Control to do that, with Shift to go sideways. Always useful to show some of these really basic things. Anyhow, notice those notes that I applied that head scheme to these notes, but the new notes don't get that. So what I really want to do is say I want all my notes to have that head scheme. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to right-click the staff, which is two-finger tap on my touchpad, and then staff part properties. Then advanced style properties. It's a little buried, but it's worth it because there you'll see note head scheme, and I can set it to pitch names now, and it applies to all notes, whether they're already entered or not. So now I can enter some new notes. And they all get the note names in them. So that process that I just showed you is, again, one of these things that's kind of useful outside. I mean, maybe the note names is mostly for education, but the idea that I was able to select something and then click notes to limit the selection to just the notes and therefore get access to the rest of the inspector, that's useful to anyone. As is the fact that right-clicking a staff gives you access to staff properties. And there's a lot of interesting settings in here. You can make a staff small. So like if you're producing music for, say, violin with piano accompaniment, you can make the violin part. You can make the piano part show the violin staff small so that you can focus on just the accompaniment, but also see the violin staff. You can also do things like turn off the display of time signatures and bar lines, which is useful if you're producing Renaissance music or any other form of non-metered music. So anyhow, there's a bunch of settings there in staff properties that can be useful, as well as additional ones under advanced style properties. So the second dialog is mostly for guitar tablature, for what it's worth. Most of the settings there, there's a bunch of new settings that will show up only if you're using tablature. So yeah, I figured that the play panel was actually helping make my face not cover anything else. So I'm just going to always get in the habit of leaving the play panel up, which is good because I can manipulate volume too. All right, is there a way to turn note names on for all staves? So no, doing it one staff at a time is currently the way. However, you could certainly, if you have a whole score, like if I want to do it for my entire MuseScore Café, Control A to select all, and then notes, and then change the head scheme to pitch names, and now I got pitch names everywhere on the MuseScore Café theme. Now, that only works once the score is done, right? Because if I enter new notes now, they're not going to inherit that setting. But I guess my question, Bob, is what kind of score are you creating here? And because the reason I ask that, I want to undo my changes there. The reason I ask is typically the kind of music for which note names are useful is not typically involving lots of staves, right? It's either a single staff, simple thing, or it's a recorder duet like this, or maybe it's piano music. Well, in that case, there's really only 2 staves, maybe 3 staves. And what you want to do then is save that as a template. So actually, do I know that staff properties get saved in a template? No, I don't know that. So I think it's time I find out. I'm going to show you how to create a template. So this particular score is set up for a recorder duet, but you can hear that there's percussion in there also, right? If I press I or go to Edit, Instruments, you'll see that there's actually a percussion staff that I'm calling Stamp. Because it's stamping your foot. I should have called it stomp, but whatever. It's what happens here. It's that clonk there. So I have a percussion staff that is set to not visible. It's turned off. So I've got a number of things going on in this score. It's got 2 visible recorder staves, and it has that invisible staff, and it has that special staff property set. What I want to do now is I'm going to save this score to my templates folder, and I'm going to see what happens. I, to be honest, don't really know. Actually, one thing I do know will happen. So I'm going to actually turn off multi-measure rest. See this multi-measure rest here? That's because I pressed M when I was developing this score. That turns on multi-measure rest. So if you leave a couple of measures rest and you press M, it collapses them. But I don't want that in my template. So I've got this set up here. and I'm going to go to File, Save As. And now I'm going to go to my templates folder. So not scores, but, oops, not scores. I got to go up past scores and go to templates. And I'm going to call this Recorder Duet. So now, if I go to create a new score, I'll click the new score icon here. Duet, I'll just call it Duet. And under Custom Templates here, I will now see Recorder Duet. So I'm going to pick that, and it shows a picture of what that score is going to look like, and I'll hit Finish. So apparently my stomp staff wasn't, it got added, but it didn't get marked invisible. That doesn't surprise me, because some things in a template, not everything that's in the template kind of gets inherited when you create scores from it, but all I have to do is press I and set that to invisible now. And now it's invisible again if I want. But I don't really want it invisible yet because I got to add some notes to it, right? So it's good that it wasn't invisible. But now let's find out if when I add notes, if they already have the note names in them. Ha, they do. So luckily that works. And apparently it's set to use a different transposition, because was that in my other one also? Whoops, I didn't mean to show you this one yet. MuseScore Café, Recorder Duet. Oh, when I did that, okay, so here's another thing to know. When you save as something, now that's that file. Now my original, now I'm working with Recorder Duet, and it's replaced the original Pirates there. So I want to reopen. I'm going to open the Start Center here with F4, and then I can reopen that recent score, Pirates. All right, so in Pirates, I had customized to just use a regular treble clef rather than that transposing clef, because MuseScore has a different concept of how recorders might transpose than I wanted it to be, and I must have customized that when I created this score, and the template defaulted back to the other clef. So I'm going to change this back to standard, this clef. There we go. So just by changing it to standard treble clef instead of the transposing clef. That's because recorders do sound an octave higher than written. But I didn't want to see the 8 there, so I actually went, and I'll show you this. This staff here is set, because it was set in my score to be an octave higher than written. It is an octave higher than written, but then also the clef is making it be another octave higher. So the place where I had set that was back in staff part properties. This is where I had set the transposition to be an octave. So when I originally created my Pirates Duet, I think I set the transposition here so I could use a normal clef. But when I created the score from a template, it kept that transposition, but then it reapplied the default clef there of the treble with an 8. So I ended up getting double transposition, if that makes sense. So anyhow, that's what happened. The letters are hard to see in yellow, especially on a computer screen. Printed, it's a little easier, but I think what happens is it's one or the other, right? You either read note names or you read the colors, and so probably doing both was a little silly, but I wanted to show that they're both possible. So the note names get small when accidentals are in there, but then hopefully you don't have many accidentals. The type of music in which you're putting note names in there is meant to be really simple music for children, and you want it extra large too. So let me show you how to make extra large music, because that's another thing you want to do for children. So let me create a new score here. Actually, I'll just go back to that one that I was working on here. That score that I had here, this is, if I print this, it's just going to look standard size. The score is going to be about, let's see, it's 1.75 millimeters between staff lines, whatever that times 4 is. If I'm doing my math right, that's 7 millimeters tall for the staff. That's a kind of typical staff size. But if I go to Format, Page Settings, I can change that. So instead of the staff space being 1.75, I can just make it be, and this is a little fiddly, I have to say, to try to type a new number into this. I can't just type 3 because now it thinks, oh, you typed a 3 in front of that 1, it's 31. So it is a little fiddly, I will absolutely agree. But if I just erase that 1, erase that 7, erase that 5, now I got 3 millimeter staff size. This is a 12 millimeter staff now. This is huge. So this is quite useful. So to make bigger staff, you do that. Conversely, to make a smaller staff, like if you're trying to put a whole big band arrangement on a single sheet of paper, you're going to need smaller staves, or you're going to need bigger paper. So in any case, that's the setting there. So it's under Format, Page Settings, the staff space. You're literally setting the distance between staff lines. So that times 4 is the height of your staff. In any case, okay, so Bob, you're doing analysis for music theory, and you need note names. That seems a little incongruous to me. It seems like if you're doing music theory analysis, you would normally not be wanting note names in there also, because that's going to get in the way of the rest of your analysis with Roman numerals and so forth. By the way, speaking of analysis, if I do want analysis, actually, let me show you this other score here. I didn't put any in this particular score, so I'm going to come back to that. But if in Pirates I wanted to put in some Roman numeral analysis, it's here, add text, Roman numeral analysis. I've defined a shortcut for it, Control-Shift-R, because I use it a lot. And now I can just type 1, and then flat 7, right? And then flat 3, 6, or whatever the thing is. I'm just making stuff up here. That's not the real thing. Yeah, that's not the real Roman numerals. But the point is I can just type stuff in, and there it shows up. If you've never defined shortcuts before, it's in Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts. And then you go down to the search here and type Roman, and there you'll see the Roman numeral analysis command, and then you can hit define there to define your own shortcut for it. So that's, again, a technique useful to pretty much anyone to be able to define your own shortcuts. And anyone doing music analysis also, Roman numeral analysis is usually a huge part of it. So let's see what else I see here. Can you import a PDF? Yeah. So yeah, as some of you have seen, that it wasn't so much a question but a statement. You can go to File, Import PDF, and this sends you to a website that's running a program called Audiveris that attempts to convert it to music XML. Results are mixed. I would say a really simple score will import well, but most scores end up importing with enough errors that you'd be better off just typing it in yourself. That's my experience and a lot of other people's. But if most of your scores are simple enough, by all means. Let's see. What else we got here? I'm looking at yeah, so scaling up, yeah. So yeah, they could you make the letter black for this? That's a good question. There would be a way to do that if you really needed to. I would look at this on paper first and decide if it's because this is bright, right? It's like shining through the yellow. On paper, it's not quite as bright. The background isn't emitting light, right? It's just a white piece of paper. So this looks different printed, but it's white on yellow is not going to be easy. So to get black to show there, what you'd want to do is get a black note behind it. So let me see if I can do that. I'm going to try this because it's an interesting question. I'm zooming way in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a second E on this here. So I'm going to enter another E and lower it an octave, and then I'm going to if you have two E's on the same stem, MuseScore puts them on opposite sides of the stem because it thinks you don't want to do what I'm about to do. But I'm going to override that auto setting, and I'm going to set it explicitly to normal. And now I'm going to press Shift X. That's the shortcut to flip this to the other side of the stem. Oh, come on, isn't it? Shift X. Huh, I thought it was. Does it not want to do that because there's another note in the way? Yeah, I feel like maybe that's the problem. All right, there it is. Now the only trick is I somehow need to get this note underneath the other note. I'm going to use the stacking order here in the inspector. I'm going to lower its stacking order, and now it's behind the other one. I was hoping that that would make it. I was hoping that that would make the black of that note head show through, but unfortunately it doesn't. Oh man, I was so close yet so far. I guess this E is actually opaque and not transparent. That's just the way it is. Yeah. Oh well, it was worth a shot. By the way, you can if you create your own note head with a black letter in it, you could just add that graphic there. So let me show you about that, because that's sometimes a useful thing. Let me undo all my changes in here, because this is a perfectly good score. I don't want to mess up. I can, I'll just go to my blank score here. I can use the image capture tool here on the toolbar to grab a little image in my score, then hit Control-C to copy, and now Escape to leave image capture node. And now I can click somewhere else and Control-V to paste a copy of that image. And so now I have that image there. So if you have an image, and you don't, any image will work, right? Not just ones that image capture mode created, but you could, you could take a photograph from Photoshop if you want. So you can, if you have an image of a note head that has the color kind of set up the way you want, you'd be able to paste it right on top of the note. So that's another possibility. So pasting images is actually something that's often useful in music for children, because, children like pictures. I mean, we all like pictures, but, we often like to make educational materials fun, right? Did I do that in Pirates? No, I didn't make it very fun. I could have found a picture of a pirate and pasted it in here, and that would have been kind of cute. That would have been nice. But I didn't do that. So you saw that I have invisible staff. I'm going to press I and turn on visibility for that extra percussion staff now, so you can see that what I've done is I entered some notes into it, and so those notes are, right, it's a capasa sound on every eighth note, and then claves on every dotted quarter. So I entered that onto my invisible staff so that you could hear the pulse while you're playing this, which is going to be useful if you're trying to play along to this. And then on that one place, I actually put in a third note there, a bass drum, and that became the foot stomp. So entering percussion music is like a whole other topic, but I covered that in a cafe maybe a couple months ago. So yeah, that's something you might want to hunt out if you're interested more in percussion. And yes, I saw the question about coming back to this. All this stuff is always there on YouTube. And let me actually just post a couple of links that are very useful. One is, this is the community website. So this is the website that I've created specifically for discussions among people who are, checking out the cafe and so forth, and have interest in MuseScore and interested in my teaching. I also do the music master class on Thursdays, where I, instead of teaching how to use MuseScore, I teach about actually writing music. what am I saying? So yeah, this is the website where there's all this information uh, about that people are sharing. It's like a whole community where you can get in discussions about music, get in discussions about MuseScore, and this is where the kind of home for the cafe is. You'll see on the left there, MuseScore Cafe Watch, and when you click on that watch thing here, you'll see if I were to press the play button here, I would see myself. I'm not going to do that because it's just going to create weird echoes and stuff. But then you can go previous episodes and get at them there. They're just on YouTube. So, but that's an easy way to find them. You can find them and everything else through the community website. So, community. I can't remember if I actually pasted it. I was getting ready to, and then I got distracted. So this is the community website here. All right. So looking to see if I see any other stuff here. Can you just ask MuseScore to do the Roman numeral analysis? No. I mean, that's artificial intelligence, right? Real music isn't just plain triads. There's all sorts of, just triad after triad. There's usually passing tones and places where maybe there's an omitted note, places where you have three notes that could either be seen as E minor chord in second or E minor 7 in first inversion, or it's a G6 chord. There's all sorts of places where you really need human intelligence to figure out which of those notes are actually chord tones and which are not. And here's three notes that don't totally form a clear triad. What's the best way to represent that as a chord? What should I assume the missing note is? There's all sorts of intelligence that needs to happen to do a good Roman numeral analysis. Now, there are people who like AI programming, and probably someone has tried their hand at a plugin for that. I know there's an attempt to do chord symbols, but it only handles the simplest of cases. Certainly nothing that you would need to think about doing Roman analysis for. So what else can I tell you here? There's so much about what MuseScore can do for education, and I'm again just sort of skipping all over the place because that's the nature of these cafes. But I want to show some of the other things that I knew I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to show you that invisible staff because it's really useful for creating something in playback. Because now when I undo all my changes, I get back to the invisible staff, and then when people play this, they hear the pulse. And you can also, by the way, go to the mixer. If I open the mixer, which is F10, then I can mute one of the parts. So, and for some reason, the mixer, when I'm doing these cafes, doesn't want to let me drag it at first, and then I have to fiddle with it and before it does. So in any case, if I could tell it I don't want to hear the first part, I only want to hear the other parts. So I've muted that first part, and now people can practice their practice playing the second part. Or they could play the first part and hear the second part. So they could hear the duet being played. They could play the first part while they're hearing the second part and the percussion. So the mixer lets you do all sorts of things like that can be very useful for practice purposes. So yeah, that's another thing that can be done. So I've been focusing here on things for children. There's a couple other things I want to show you, one of which I want to go back to my community site. I've created this section here that says Educational Partnership, and under it is a space called Resources. I'm going to paste that into the chat as well. And you got it to be black. What'd you do? Tell us what you did. I want to know. And then I want to try it. I could totally do it by creating a black. I don't know. I don't know what you did. I'm very interested to know what you did. given enough time, I could figure it out, but I'd rather cover other things and let you tell us. Lost my train of thought. Oh yes, I went here to show you the resources area. Under resources, you'll see this music education extension. This is something you can download and install into MuseScore, and I give you the instructions on how to do it. And what it does is it gives you some additional things. First of all, it gives you a template. Uh, I showed you how to create a big score and put note names in it, but I didn't have to do that. All I really had to do is say, I want a new score. And under templates here, not under custom templates, there's an education space here. And you'll see big note is one of the templates. There's also an SSA plus piano, which is very useful for children's choirs. There's also a handout and a worksheet template. And there's a flashcard template that just creates for to let you just have one big note and nothing else on the page. So there's all these templates that come with that education what's it called, an extension. But there's also these workspaces. So up in the upper right, you see these other workspaces. One of them is called Young Musicians. I'm going to switch to this one so you can see what it does. The Young Musicians does a number of things. It displays the piano keyboard, which you can do yourself. Just go to the View menu and turn on piano keyboard. But it also changed the font to Comic Sans or some sort of equivalent on your system. And it also supposedly was going to turn up the font size, but for whatever reason, I think I must have changed something. It didn't seem to have done that. So I can still do that myself. I go to Edit, Preferences, General, and here's where I can change the font size. So instead of 9-point font, change it to 16-point font. And suddenly now I have bigger font, right? So if you want kids to actually use MuseScore, there's an option for you. Use that Young Musicians workspace. And unfortunately, making the font bigger has messed up some display of things. Maybe that's why I ended up turning it off. That works a little differently on every system. Let me see what happens when I go back to the Café, if it's going to go back to, regular size. Good. And now what happens if I go back to Young Musicians? Got to find this out. Nope, it didn't remember that setting. So I must have changed it. But so there's that Young Musicians workspace. And it's just there to give you, some bigger things. It's also simplified, right? It only shows you a few clefs. It's got to show you all the key signatures, but it's only got a couple of articulations. It's much simpler workspace, meant to be, this is what kids might need, a bare minimum kind of them for younger children. So that's something that you might want to know about working with kids. But now I want to move ahead a little bit, talking to some older kids. So what Michael did here is creating an Ian staff text, made it Arial. Oh my gosh! And you dragged it on top. So you actually made the font. You made the font kind of match. You made the letter basically match the letter that's in there. So what I will tell you is there is another alternative. If you know you want the note names black, you can do that using another plugin. There is an older plugin before MuseScore had the ability to make notes note names within the note heads. There used to be a plugin that did exactly what you just talked about, basically adding that as text and then positioning it on top of the note head. That plugin is no longer as necessary because of this, but it can be useful to get you a black note head. Now, I don't know that it does a better job or that it ends up being easier than doing it manually, but yeah, sounds like you're exactly right. I want to try something different, though. I want to try something that maybe is a little more straightforward than using staff text. I'm going to use fingering, which for me is Control-Alt-F because I have to find a shortcut. And I'm going to define my fingering, E. And I'm going to set that to be some sort of font that I think will match. Do I have Helvetica? Apparently I don't. Do I have Arial? Yeah, I guess I do. And Arial Black looks too thick. Regular Arial might be about right. But 8 is definitely too big. I need to turn it down to about that size. And now the reason I'm using fingering is I am going to customize the style here. So instead of using fingering style, which knows to go above the staff, I'm going to pick a user style. The reason I'm going to do that, oh yeah, and I as soon as I do that, it blew away my other settings there, but I can change that. Well, actually, instead of Arial, I'm going to use Free Sans. I know it's not really pronounced sans in French, but we're not all French speakers. And I'll make it bold because that seems like that's about right. And then I'm going to shrink it down. So what's happening here is by setting it to be a user style, it doesn't do any automatic position. It's going to position it directly relative to the note head. So now it's always going to be the same distance away to manually position it. I feel like that's still a little too big, so I'm going to go one size smaller. And now it's always going to be the same distance. So whatever distance I move it, let me select this thing, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4. So it took 4 clicks over, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks up. Look at that. That was a really good idea you had there, Michael. It's a little, not perfectly matched, but it ain't bad. And I could actually increase the font size. Oh, by the way, so here's this thing. Right now I want to click the E, but it doesn't. It wants to click the note instead. If I control click now, it will unselect the note, but reselect the text. So control click switches between any overlapping elements. So I can finesse using the inspector the position. I want to get it a tiny bit, tiny bit lower. So maybe 4, 1, nope, the other direction. 3, 5, 3, 6, 3, 7. 3, 7 is pretty darn good. And it's just a tiny bit off in size. Can I do half point font sizes? Looks like 5.5 is way bigger. How about 5.1? Is that a thing? 5.2? So I'm just experimenting here. But, you could totally keep doing this, right? It's fun. And so go back to my 0.4. Yeah, so I don't know that point partial point size really help. But if I just go to 6-point font, I can get it to cover it probably more directly. I don't know. 5 is pretty close. So in any case, that was a fun little diversion. So thanks for sharing. No one will see the white space, but here's what I think will happen. There will be a little optical glitch. Transitions, vision issues often in color, like color blindness issues, are about contrast between colors. Some colors, like almost everyone has trouble seeing certain combinations of like red text on green background or vice versa. But there's other combinations that like different types of color blindness affect. And it's things like this, these little transitional colors between that can affect people with certain vision issues. So I actually would be a little worried about it, but not a ton. So, all right. So in any case, where are those? Oh, so Peter, you probably missed the part where I showed you how to install those. They're here. If you go to the community where I posted the link to the community, you go to Educational Partnership, Resources, and the Music Education Extension. I'll post even that direct link. So there you go. So I don't know that anyone in particular would find that to be a problem. I'm just saying that's the sort of thing that is a problem. Those little transitional issues, they can trigger issues in certain types of visual impairment, particularly color blindness, particular types of color blindness, because there's a lot of types. So in any case, I'm not saying I know that would be a problem, but I am saying it's something to think about. All right, so I did want to flip over back to my score here and move forward in time to when your kids start to grow up a little bit more and talk more about things like Roman numeral analysis. This is an example of the handout. So those workspaces that I created, those young musicians and music education workspace. The music education workspace doesn't do a ton, but it does a couple things. It gives you um, to be honest, I don't remember what it gives you. Oh, it gives you this annotations palette, which is really nice. I've long since enhanced it for my own use, so I have a lot more symbols than just these now on my own annotations palette. But it also has these function theory symbols for people who are doing graduate level analysis with Schenkerian analysis and what Riemann, is that the guy's name? I don't do that. So annotations palette is really nice. And then there's this Kodai hand signs that does Kodai hand signs, do, re, mi, right? All those things as symbols you can add to your score also. So that's in the music education extension. But also then when I created a score, Control N is the shortcut. If I pick the hand, actually I'm going to pick worksheet because it's almost the same, but worksheet puts in the header a place for name and date, so that you print that thing out and then people can write in their name and write in the date. It's got a few other style settings and things that are kind of useful. So anyhow, that's what that setting is. But let's go back to my handout. There's not really a ton going on here that you need a template for. There's really nothing that you need a template for, but I want to show you what's actually happening in this. I'm going to go to the view menu, and you'll see that I've turned off display of things that are normally visible, like invisible items, unprintable items, frames, and irregular measures. I'm going to turn on those first three because they're going to be useful. And I've got shortcuts for that. So you can now see the frames here. And so the title frame there has the name of my handout and like a subtitle, because that's like a chapter and section. And then I've got these text frames that have blocks of text in them. And MuseScore does not have word wrap, so I've disciplined myself to write everything in my handouts as bullet points. So they're one line each, and I don't have to worry about word wrap. That's the way I've chosen to simplify my life there. You can see all this yellow text. Well, that was added from the annotations palette. You just select a piece of text and then click one of my yellow texts. And now you got some yellow text that you can edit. And it's, not just yellow text, it's red text, but with a yellow background on it. Now, you don't need the extension to do that. You can take any old piece of text you want, come over the inspector, and change the color to be red. You can then add a frame to it to make that rectangular background. You can color that frame's background to be, sorry, my light timer is telling me that I've been sitting still for an hour. You can set the frame of it. I'll just go through it. If I set that frame to be a rectangular frame, now you see that frame there. But I don't want to see that border, so I'm going to set the border thickness to be 0. But I want the highlight, which is the basically the background color of the frame. I want to set it to be yellow. But I don't want it to be, well, first of all, its defaults to transparent. So if I just click OK right now, nothing's going to happen. Right? Nothing appeared to happen. However, if I come here and I set it to be fully opaque, that's the wrong value. I got to remember where it is. It's alpha channel. If I turn alpha channel to 255, it's going to be fully opaque yellow. Well, that's okay sometimes, but it'll cover other things, right? It's totally opaque. It's covering the notes. I don't necessarily want that. I've made mine semi-opaque. Well, maybe I didn't. I thought I did. But in any case, if you pick a value between 0 and 255, it becomes more like a highlighter where you can still see stuff through it. So that can be useful also. You'll also see that I added little arrows while you're typing text. I can then click my little arrow there and add arrows. So that's that works. Oh, the highlighting here is if I select a measure and then click the highlighter, I get this yellow translucent thing that I can then drag onto my staff, and that's translucent. So that's another thing useful for educators, but could be useful in any context. Anytime you want color, basically, that could be useful. So What else? What else have I seen? Trying to write music with no E. Oh, yeah, there's a thought right there. And that's certainly doable. You could write, if you think about it, a pentatonic scale is missing a couple of notes. So if you stuck to an F pentatonic scale, which is totally a thing, if you're writing for children, there's the whole series of instruments called the Orff instruments by Carl Orff, the Carmina Burana guy, right? So he devised this series of instruments used in music and a whole system of pedagogy for teaching children. And in some of the versions of those Orff instruments, they're actually just pentatonic things. So they only have in them the notes of a pentatonic scale. So you could make it be F, G, A, C, and D. And then you would have no B and no E. And you would be able to write for that set of notes and have it played on an Orff instrument if you found one tuned to F. That's what I don't know if they make them tuned to F or if they're only tuned to C. But writing pentatonic music can be interesting, especially as an exercise for children. It gets old, I would say, quickly. Writing music that's like just uses a pentatonic scale. But okay, so here's I'm going to skip way ahead in advancedness and delve more into music masterclass territory, but you can't stop me, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you something I've been working on. Take a look at this little example of a canon that I wrote, which is almost entirely diatonic. So the only non-diatonic notes are these Fs, right? And it's fine. It's not necessarily the most interesting canon you've ever heard in the world, but it works, right? So this is playable on Orff instruments that are just diatonic Orff instruments because they have replaceable keys. So what you could do is you could have some of the people have their setup with F sharps, and then they could play any of the first two measures. Then you set up other people's instruments where you replace the F sharp with an F, and they can play these two measures. And then you sort out who plays what. And some people play the F sharp, some people play the Fs. So you could totally get this played with no other additional work. So yes, I know you're going to try, and that's why I want to show you this as a way of making it interesting. So this is almost completely diatonic, and the only thing that's not about it is F sharp in one measure versus F natural in another, and that's doable just by having one set of instruments with the F sharp and the other set of instruments with F natural, and the Orff instruments are set up both ways. Now check out what I've done. I've added additional non-diatonic notes in a bass part. I added an E flat here, I added a G sharp here, and I guess that's actually all I added. But check out how much more interesting it suddenly gets. Now, all you need is one person who can play that bass line. Right? That bass line, you just find one person who has a chromatic instrument, whether it's a keyboard that they can plunk that out on, or whatever other instrument, maybe just a guitar or a bass or something. You write that out. Maybe you write it out in tablature for someone to play on a bass. And so suddenly you're able to, even though that melody was almost completely diatonic, by coming up with, by harmonizing it appropriately, you can make it a lot more interesting than it started. I think, do I have another version that's that simple? Yeah, okay, so here's another one. Here's a canon sequence. So if you just look at the top line, it's completely diatonic. Right? Completely diatonic, but I put in a bass line and suddenly it's so you can do this sort of stuff all day long. I have been doing this all day long for like the last week. It's great fun. I got to stop at some point. And so, speaking of such matters, yeah, I need to be wrapping up this cafe at some point. But notice the other thing I've added here. These are just rehearsal marks. These text in boxes. I didn't want to do anything fancy. I just used rehearsal mark. If I decided I wanted it to be, oh, I want that box to be a little fatter or a bigger margin around it, I can customize it in the inspector and then hit the set as style button. Like if I decide I want yeah, maybe I want the margin on that around the text to be a little bigger. Here we go. So maybe make it one staff space and then hit set as style. And now all those rehearsal marks have a bigger frame around them. So I use rehearsal marks quite a bit when I'm creating these sorts of handouts. But if you look at my handout, that's pretty much what I've showed you is what I'm doing. I want to undo all my changes so I don't screw this thing up. Yeah, using the yellow text, inserting the arrows every once in a while. I also use section breaks. Section breaks from the breaks and spacers palette so that if you're playing through the example, it pauses at the end of that example. And that way, so if someone plays the example, they have the opportunity to then, don't have to like finesse the space bar. They can actually, while it's paused, hit it there. So, yeah, well, the thing is, yeah, if you go to YouTube there and hit the and look at the playlist, you'll see the title. Like this one is called MuseScore in Education. You will see the list of every single episode of the Cafe with the titles in them. So the cafe works that way. The music master class doesn't because I don't have topics. I talk about whatever comes up. Some days there might be a particular topic that sort of develops organically, but I don't necessarily go in with a real specific topic in mind. It's just responding to the music basically. But for the cafe, I always have a topic, even if it's the ask me anything topic, right? So, I've covered a whole lot of different features, showed you how you might use them in an educational context, and hopefully along the way showed you some features that will be useful to you even if you're not creating educational materials or working in an educational context. So with that said, I am going to get back to finishing up my work on Canon so I can finish my counterpoint course. So, thanks everyone for being here and checking out what I am doing here in the MuseScore Cafe. Hope you found it useful. Hope you found something here useful. Feel free to share this as much as you want with different people. Send them the YouTube link and whatnot. And we do this every week, talking about some aspect of MuseScore. Today, talked about educational applications, and you see it kind of went other places too. That's pretty typical. I start off with a topic. I kind of meander around that topic, but show other things along the way, answer questions. We have a lot of fun. I like to think anyhow. And that's what we do here every week, every Wednesday. So also to support what I'm doing, I highly encourage you to visit my website, the link pinned at the top. Check out the different things I offer, the Mastering MuseScore Complete course for learning everything about MuseScore, or the music theory courses I offer. The basic music theory course, it's really the basic, teaching you what triads are, what the different scales are, major and minor scales. And then the harmony course that gets much deeper into talking about harmony, showing you how to do the things like you saw me doing with the canon, the counterpoint course that I'm developing. All that stuff is available there. I encourage you to check it out, help support what I'm doing here by maybe checking out one of those courses. So anyhow, hope you've all had a good time here. I will see some of you tomorrow for the Music Master class, definitely hope to, and perhaps next week here for the cafe. So until next time, see y'all later.